Will Derek Carr be the Raiders starter in 2020? I want you to type 4 for believe it, baby, or type 0 for tuck rule, tuck that, because I have already seen a ton of rumors around Derek Carr and whether or not he will be the Raiders starter in 2020. But before I give my answer, I'm going to go over Carr's contract details, some potential quarterbacks that the Raiders could sign in free agency, and some top 10 quarterbacks that you could go out and draft. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/Raiders Report. Nicky Bonds, give me that beat.
That's that autumn wind. Shout out to the Raiders, man, we about to win.
Now, I saw this article from Yahoo that literally already came out this morning on Monday that said Derek Carr cannot carry the Raiders, and it is time for the Raiders to move on from their quarterback. So, their reasons that they list are because, one, Derek can't win the big game, and also he struggles in the cold. Now, I came here on the show a few days ago, and I said, maybe Derek can play in the cold. He's just played tough competition. Well, what I saw this past week against the Chiefs, I'm starting to think maybe he can't play in the cold. Now, Yahoo did make the argument that if you can't play in cold games, well, guess when the playoffs happen? In the cold most of the time. So I understand this argument. My entire thing, though, is, and they also point at Derek's career record, I don't know if that's fair to just put all these losses on Derek, because when you look at all the turnover that the Raiders have had at the head coaching, offensive coordinator position, heck, skill position, I don't know if you could just point the finger at Derek Carr, and especially for this past loss. So I have a question for everyone who's watching the Raiders Report right now. We are the most interactive show on YouTube, and I want to hear from the nation. Who deserves the blame, okay? Who deserves the blame for yesterday's loss of going up against the Chiefs? I want you to type C for Carr. I want you to type WR for the wide receivers, or I want you to type PC for the play calling. Now, I get it. Carr was bad, and he does deserve some blame. But football's a team sport. I think we can all agree on that. The wide receivers, they were targeted 3 times, 1 catch, but they could not get open. That's not Carr's fault. And then PC, if you want to type that, the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, literally said he knew what plays they were going to do. Maybe John needs to switch it up a little bit. So who deserves the blame? But let's look at Derek and what happened this past week going up against the Chiefs. I mean, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. The touchdown came in garbage time. One of the picks went to the house. I mean, 222 yards, 20 of 30. His completion percentage has been up. But I think we can all agree this dink and dunk type offense, and as the Honey Badger alluded to, we know that Derek wants to go to running backs. We know that Derek wants to go to tight ends. What did they try to do? They tried to take away all his wide receiver options and really try to lean on play calling that, well, there were sometimes I was left my head scratching. But I've been left my head scratching the last 2 weeks because what I saw from Derek against the Jets, this picture kind of explains it all. I think when Derek has his mojo going, he is a very good quarterback. And yes, I'll say very good. However, as soon as that mojo gets snapped, he loses confidence very, very quickly, which is why I'm making this video, because if you're a franchise quarterback making about $25 million a year, you need to have your mojo all the time. And I don't care if it's cold. I don't care what the circumstances are. You need to be able to carry your team. And from what I've seen this past year in 2019, I'm not sure. I wish I could sit up here and tell you all that, yes, I am confident in Derek. But when I go back and I look at certain games, like I look at the game against the Texans, I thought he played great. 3 touchdowns, 280-something yards. But over these last 2 weeks, I am so confused on what type of quarterback Derek Carr is, which is why I'm going to hit you with this question one more time. Will Derek Carr be the Raiders starter in 2020? So if you're watching this on YouTube, you might get hit with an ad break. While it's playing, I want you to scroll down and then find that pinned comment, and I want you to comment because this is what I'm making the pinned comment. So if you think Derek Carr will be the starter in 2020. Now I got Carr's contract details because this is a big part of the discussion and whether or not Derek is going to be the starter in 2020. Now, if you go back and remember, he became the highest paid player in 2017, and he signed that extension 5 years, $125 million. And my favorite thing that I saw in this Derek Carr contract extension article, keeping the franchise public face in silver and black through the 2020 season. Now, we'll look into his details in that contract in just a quick sec, But I want to break it down here with BetDSI, the internet's #1 sports book. If y'all like to bet on the Raiders, or heck, you want to bet on more NFL games, college football, the NBA season's here, go to BetDSI. It's the internet's #1 sports book. But to get that deal, you got to go to chatsports.com/bet. You got to use that promo code Raiders120 for 120% deposit bonus. Speaking of money, let's look at Carr's stats before his contract extension and after his contract extension. The yards, they definitely favor before the contract extension. Touchdowns, obviously, and even the interceptions. Now, I don't want to say just because after the extension Carr got lazy, he's not that type of person. He's not that type of leader. But things have gotten a lot more difficult for Derek after the contract extension. I think one of the reasons is when you pay a player a lot of money, it kind of limits your ability to ultimately go out and get other players. So let's take a look now at Derek Carr's contract details. Now, I've already had so many people say, Mitch, the Raiders should cut Derek Carr right now in 2019. The issue with that, we're already basically, the season's over, and it would cost the Raiders about $27 million in dead cap hit, which that makes no sense. But now let's look at 2020. Derek is set to make $21.5 million, but if the Raiders were to cut him, it's only going to cost them $5 million in dead cap. Then you see 2021, 2022, and then in 2023, Derek will be a free agent. Now, Derek's money, some of you might say, well, Mitch, we're overpaying him. I can guarantee you one thing. Subscribing to the Raiders Report, that's absolutely free, and you're going to get your bang for your buck. So the Raiders Report is the #1 Raiders YouTube channel on YouTube. That one's for Chucky heads. Believe it, baby. But what makes us different and why you should subscribe, there's not another channel out there that releases more videos, that does more live Q&As, and that does more giveaways than us here at the Raiders Report. And if you're a diehard Raider fan, make sure you subscribe because that's the only people I want subscribed to youtube.com/Raiders Report. So I'll take you back now to these contract details in 2020 because that's the discussion here. Do we pay Derek Carr $21.5 million or do we cut him for $5 million, okay? Because then if you cut him, you could be looking at here some potential quarterback options in 2020. Now, if you see a player that's not on this list, or I guess if you don't see a player, throw him in the comments section. But Cam Newton, is he going to be the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers? I'm not quite sure. He's not a free agent in 2020. But then you see Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and Phillip Rivers. All four of those quarterbacks will be a free agent in 2020. So if the Raiders want to go out and sign one of those four, they can do it. Now, the next four quarterbacks you're going to see on screen. Ryan Tannehill, he is a free agent, but I think the Titans actually should probably keep him, and we're going to be going up against the Titans this upcoming week. Then you have Andy Dalton. They only have one win. I think that they're going to look in the draft. Case Keenum, he's been given the short hand of the stick for the Washington Redskins. And then the #1 player that was on my show yesterday when I did my Raiders vs. Chiefs reaction was Colin Kaepernick. So, the way that this show runs, it is from the nation, and I want to hear from you. Name a quarterback the Raiders should sign in 2020 free agency. If you're saying, no, Mitch, they shouldn't sign a single player or a single quarterback, I want you to type, don't sign. So scroll down there to the comments section and let me know a quarterback that you think that the Raiders should sign in 2020 free agency. Or, if you don't want the Raiders to move on from Carr, or if you don't want them to sign anyone, type don't sign. But there's free agency, then there's the draft. And if there's one thing that I've learned this year, I'm trusting Mike Mayock, I'm trusting John Gruden in their process in the draft because we can all agree that our rookies this year have been very good. And if there's one of these quarterbacks that they want to go out and get, maybe you could do it. Now, the only one on this list that I think is absolutely off limits is Joe Burrow because of what the Raiders would have to give up to get Burrow. Now, Herbert, Tua, if he's healthy, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason are some notable quarterback prospects in this 2020 draft. Now, another player that a lot of people talked about yesterday on my show was Jalen Hurts. For me, Jalen Hurts is not going to be that reliable of an NFL-type quarterback. He's fun to watch, especially in that Oklahoma offense. But none of these options I would rather have play for the Oakland Raiders than Derek Carr. So Anthony Gordon's fun, Nate Stanley, Bryce Perkins, watched that game this past week, and then Shea Patterson out of Michigan. I hear plenty from Michigan here at Chat Sports. So name a quarterback that the Raiders should draft in 2020. You can look at it two ways. Either one, the quarterback's going to take over for Derek, or two, that quarterback's going to be the backup to Derek Carr this upcoming season. And if you don't want them to draft a quarterback, because honestly, I don't think it's their biggest need, I want a wide receiver. I want you to type don't draft. So name a quarterback or type don't draft. So now here are the options that the Raiders could do in 2020. You could cut Carr in 2020, which saves $5 million. It's a $5 million dead cap hit. Okay? The next thing that the Raiders could potentially do in 2020 is you could trade Carr for what I think you're only going to get a 3rd or a 4th round pick. The reason why I say that is because I go back and I look at Teddy Bridgewater. He went for a 3rd round pick. But honestly, I think that he probably goes for a little bit more of a 4th round pick. We'll see what the Raiders do. But the Raiders do have right now 3 3rd round picks. Now, you could sign a free agent quarterback. Some of the quarterbacks that I mentioned or detailed below, you could also even go out and maybe even trade for a quarterback if that's what you really want to do. Maybe like a Cam Newton or, some other options there. Or you could draft a quarterback in the 2020 draft. Now, we know John Gruden loves his quarterbacks. Mike Mayock also loves quarterbacks. But if there's one thing that I've learned, I think actually that the Raiders, they're going to try to go out and get a quarterback that's a veteran more than trying to go out and draft a quarterback, because if you do that, well, I think you're kind of back in rebuild mode right now. So I'm ending the show. Will Derek Carr be the Raiders starter in 2020? Type 4 for believe it, baby, or type 0 for tuck rule, tuck that. I said I would give my answer, and I'm going to. I think Derek Carr will be the starter in 2020. I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders to move on from Derek. I think you give him one more year in Las Vegas, and I think the big reason why Derek is struggling, 2 reasons. Play calling, and he doesn't have a number 1 wide receiver. Go out and get yourself a number 1 wide receiver in this year's NFL Draft. Raider Nation, what's going on? Is this the number 1 Raiders channel on YouTube? For Chucky Heads, believe it, baby. And if you haven't already, subscribe right here. I'm giving you Chucky Heads, news, rumors, Raider Nation rumors. And look at this, I'm making your life easier. Check out my next video. Thanks for watching, and go Raiders.